So hello everyone, welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial. This is actually my third attempt at recording this one because I had loud seagulls over the top of the shack just now, and my next door neighbour has decided they want some work done today. So just for you, I have decided that I am going to re-record this and make it as perfect as I can. So those of you who are new here, my name is Michael Ingledew and I'm all about making you successful with your adoption of integrated product support standards, specifications or processes. And I am really humbled by the level of love and thanks and comments that we're getting from you, the community. I'm doing my best to answer everybody as much as I can. You are sending in lots of really good questions, so make sure that they keep coming in. If you keep them coming in, we will keep doing the YouTube videos. We are actually now looking at, we've got that many questions coming in, we are now looking at whether we should be doing a midweek YouTube tutorial as well. So if you want YouTube tutorials midweek and on the weekend, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe, let me know, and then I will do my best to get them in. It is hard work. But anyway, that's not why you are here. You are here because you want to know, what question were you asked this week, Mike? Well, I'm going to tell you. So I was asked a question on modularisation and the modularisation of our content. And this is a really good question from a practical standpoint. This is a really good question because I have seen projects over modularise, and at the moment I'm just being generic in terms of topic based or modular based content creation. I have seen projects that over modularise, under modularise, everything in between. And so today I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense and a feel of the kind of questions that you really should be asking yourselves. So I have removed some of the content of your email, but you know, the crux of your email is that you are now looking at adopting, you are looking at both DITA and S1000D based content creation, but you are now looking at, based on the webinar that I did with Mind Manager, you are looking at defining your DMRL and you want to go and get that agreed with your customer. But your question is what is sensible and modularisation? And this is a really good question because, like I said, I have seen everything in between, from really good modularisation strategies right down to really poorly thought out modularisation strategies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about modularisation and why it's important to get it right. So S1000D itself, I've changed it to S1000D because that's your preferred, that's where you want to go. You are watching a lot of the videos that I'm doing that are showing you some of the pitfalls and showing you some of the pros and the cons of using any of these specifications or the ways and methodologies of producing our content. So we are going to focus a little bit on S1000D. Now the S1000D specification itself says that it's the smallest self-contained information unit within a technical publication. Now I actually believe that there is, Ingledew's got an opinion, guys, surprise. So the I believe that actually we need to add another word in here, but again, the word itself is open to interpretation. But I think it should say sensible. What is sensible for our content? And this is what I'm going to focus on today. We're going to look at the sensible modularisation, the sensible chunking up of our content. But not only that, if we think about the sensible content creation, we need to think about the sensible deployment and the sensible delivery of that information too. So let's think a little bit about modularisation, and I'm going to whiz through this because there's lots of stuff on my YouTube channel about that. But we have our technical publication. That technical publication, essentially, we are breaking down into these little units of reusable pieces of information, and they should make sense in their own right. So if I picked up a data module or a topic, it should make sense. And what we want to do is we identify those areas of our product, of our technical publications, and how we're going to modularize that, bring them together to make an end deliverable. We're not going to talk about publication modules or CMPs today, but I have had some questions in around that, so there'll be some stuff coming your way around that too. So once we've got this modularisation methodology, what is it we're actually trying to achieve? Well, we have our reusable or our self-contained units of information, as we've just talked about. And this is, we hope, stored in a CSDB or a content management system specific for S1000D. And, I know that some of you are out there using file systems. So, but, we have this modular content. We've broken things down. And essentially what we want to do is we want to bring them together and create a coherent output for our end user. That's the crux of what we're doing. Yes, there's lots of clever stuff going on in the middle here. We can configure the content, we can structure the content, reuse the content how we want it. One of the major benefits of using modular-based approach or topic-based approaches to our technical publication creation. And of course, we could go out to a PDF, or we could go out to a IETP or a mobile app or whatever it is we want to get out to. But essentially what we're doing here is taking all of that modular content and bringing it together to create our output. And I've color coded it here so you can see the reuse methodologies that are contained within S1000D and other approaches. But we often over modularize. So I see projects that don't think through the modularization of their content, and then what they do is they over modularize. And so over the years, I've looked at why do projects over modularize, and I've come up with a couple of things here that some might be a little bit contentious, but why do we over modularize is we're so focused on the S1000D side of the equation, breaking down the content, the XML structures, making the valid structures and conforming to business rules and all these kind of things, which is perfectly reasonable, perfectly fine. But we don't have an appreciation of how that content is actually going to be used and how it's actually going to be accessed. And we believe that everything must be a module. And so what we do is we look at the module, the content, and we break it down into absolutely every tiny minutia of content that we possibly can. And this is something that I see quite a lot, is that projects break down content just for the sheer hell of breaking down the content. And we haven't really thought about the usability of that content. And just being a cynical Ingledew, some projects are paid per module. And, so therefore we are incentivized to break down the module and or the content into as many modules as we possibly can. So that's me being cynical. But, the reality is there are different reasons why we may over modularize. And of course we can under modularize too, but the under modularization is, I'm going to talk about the user becoming lost in the content very shortly. And we have to think about, actually that's probably more what the user's used to seeing, is a lengthy piece of information. But it does move us away from the ethos of modular content. In this context, we're talking S1000D, but we could be talking other methodologies. But there are instances where there's no point in breaking it down, because it's a single piece of information that's not referenced, it's not used anywhere else. It'll never be updated. We don't need to configure it. And, it just makes sense to throw it in a module. Now, the reality is there's got to be a balance here of what's right for the content and what's right for the user and what's right for the management of that information throughout the life cycle of the platform. So we have to think about it and consider it in that context. But there are reasons why some projects over modularize and there's projects that under modularize, and it does cause a little bit of a wry smile, shall we say. So when I am asked about modularization, I talk about considerations. I look at where and what the project should be asking themselves. So if we are talking about a module, and in this case I'm just talking about tasks, but we could go into lots of other things, but trying to get in 20 minutes within our S1000D tutorial here. So what we have is, I would say, how often is a task going to be performed? And I'm going to open up an example for you here very, very shortly. And how many times is that task actually referenced? And then we need to think about the complexity of that task. And so, and the complexity of the reference task. Again, I've got an example coming up. And how likely is that common task is actually going to change? Are we talking about a very simple piece of information, or are we talking about something that is highly likely to change, be configured, be affected by through life updates of the platform? We need to think about those kind of things. But the most important from my perspective is, how likely is it we are going to lose the reader? Do we think we are actually going to lose the reader if we give them lots and lots of references to go and read for other modular content of our project? And so we really need to analyze what it is that we are going to do. So I'm going to give you an example here, very high level, very basic example, but it gives you an appreciation of kind of the thought processes that I would go through when I'm breaking down a project. It also does not represent any project or platform. I'm just giving you some colorful examples here. So here we have my made up project, and here we have a task 1 and a task 2 that are both referencing the removal of a very simple panel here. It's actually a cowling, but we can just say that, it's referring to a very simple removal of this particular cowling. And this task and this cowling is only ever removed for these 2 tasks. There's no other reason for it to come off. And it's a very simple removal process. So in S1000D and most projects would create a remove cowling module. We would create one single remove cowling module, and we would reference it within that task. Now, we have, on the other flip side, we have another cowling here, or another panel here, that's referenced from multiple tasks that it needs to be done. It's done more frequently, it comes off more frequently, and it's a stress panel, and it is subject to change and modification, those kind of things. So we have 2 different scenarios here. We have one that is a panel that's removed that does not necessarily get removed that often, and it's only ever removed for a few instances. And we have another one which is a slightly more complex panel that may be subject to change, that is removed for multiple tasks and multiple reasons. So my suggestion is that what we would do is, for the simple panel, which is a very simple removal, and it's not very complex, and it's a very short few steps, it's probably more wise that we just include that actually inside our 2 tasks here. But for the more complex panel, and for the panel that is more likely to have informational changes and it's referenced by multiple tasks, it probably makes sense that what we do is we have a single module, or a single self-contained piece of information for the removal and the installation of this particular panel itself. So those are the 2 kind of differentiators that I'm giving you here. So this is why I say it's important to analyze the content itself, because if we over modularize, it actually does cause us some bile, and it does cause us some problems that might not necessarily be obvious to us when we're first modularizing our content. So this is where it comes down to the usability of the content. This is one of the biggest complaints that I see from users. I've got lots of friends who are still maintainers and engineers, and when we talk to them about their technical publications, we hear lots of frustrations. And this is one of those areas. If we over modularize and we deliver in an over modularized way, we are at risk of losing a user, and therefore at risk of the user making up their own mind. And there's nothing worse in a technical publication. See, we didn't have this in the old in the old days, I make myself sound really old. We didn't have this in the old days where, you know, we traversed technical publications and suites of technical publications. But if we are containing all of these modules within an IETP and we're navigating through them and we're taking the user further away from where they want to be, and right at the very end there's a broken link, we're now in a world of make your mind up maintainer, operator, engineer, and we are now introducing the possibility of risk. So, you know, what I'm saying here is that if we had a task that we are giving to our user based on the modular nature of our technical content, would likely reference other pieces of information, and that would go on infinitum. And the reality is that could go on for a much deeper nested topic-based, modular-based content deployment, which essentially we can end up frustrating or losing the end user, which is not what we want. It's not what we need. We're actually about trying to make the maintainer's life that much easier, the operator's life that much easier, by giving them the right information immediately at the point of need, and not actually frustrate them in how they access that content. So what we have to do is try and give the user what they want in a manner that they find it useful and usable, so that the content is actually adding value. So I use a term called, are we enabling or are we disabling our end user? So because we create modular content doesn't mean we publish modular content. And what I mean by that is that I have seen technical manuals that have been nothing more than a bunch of S1000D data modules all published individually and then banged together and given to an end user, which is absolutely useless to most maintainers. They will find it frustrating and hard to use. So we have to think about it in a much more sensible way when it comes to publishing. So when we are talking about modularization, we break down our content, and we have in our S1000D modules lots of self-contained auto-generated pieces of information. So whether that's, for example, a table of content, or whether that's a list of tables, list of figures, etc. And we have our content information that will reference out to media pools or media libraries. And what we want to do is have a methodology that brings that together. And this is where our software tools can really help us. And those that you can tell the difference between software vendors that have thought about the problem and software vendors that have looked at the S1000D specification or topic-based methodologies and thought that's how we need to deploy our content. You can tell the difference between the software tools that have actually thought about the problem and how the content is actually going to be used. So here you can see that what we're trying to do is get from this modular stuff on the right hand side, and we want to bring it together in a coherent technical publication on the left hand side. So some software tools will allow us to bring together all of this automated module level generated information, and we can start chapterizing our content into something that's a little bit more sensible and useful for our end user to actually use. So what we can do is extract all of that module level type information, bring it together and create what is like a normal, typical, traditional chapterized book, which means that now we are in the position where the maintainer or the operator is actually getting something that's a little bit more useful and sensible for them. Now, for this particular YouTube tutorial, this is technically actually a huge challenge for software companies. So not all software companies will support this. Some will just publish your PDF as a bunch of self-contained modules inside. It might be still inside a publication module, but they will publish it. And or you've got those that have really thought about it. So the challenge is giving information to our maintainers and our operators in a way that is sensible for them to use without them becoming lost, without them becoming frustrated. And that comes from us analysing the content and making sure that we modularize in an appropriate and sensible way that we can actually make life easier for our maintainer to use that content. We don't want to take the user away too far from the content that they are actually trying to use. So what I'm saying is that think about the modularization, think about what you're trying to achieve, and think about how it's going to be used, and then look at the tools that are out there to support you if you do have a massively broken down project that's broken everything, absolutely every minutia into modular content. Then work with a software company that can help you bring that together in a way that is coherent for the end user. And if you are deploying IETPs, make sure that we're not dragging the user too far away from where they actually want to be and where they need to be, because we are only going to lose them, we're only going to frustrate them. So where we can, and where information doesn't make sense for it to be in a module, maybe just include it inside the simple tasks that are actually referencing that content. Now, there are some really good, clever ways to deploy our S1000D content. Some software vendors have really thought about it, and they actually put information, they extract information, put it in line, so it's actually something that can be read in a coherent fashion. Like I said, one of the biggest challenges when creating our modular content is deploying it in a way that actually makes sense and is useful to our end user. So think about it. Have a look at what's sensible for you and for your product and for your users. And hopefully that gives you an idea and kind of some of the thought processes that I go to when I'm actually creating a DMRL, when I'm breaking down the content. There is a level of analysis needed for us to really understand how our modular content, our topic-based content, is going to be used, deployed, managed. How is it going to be affected through the life cycle of a platform and a project? And is it something, using the tools that we have, is it something that we can bring together and give to the end user in a fashion that at least they are pseudo familiar with, they are pseudo ready to get into the depths of the technical information so that they can go and perform the task they need to perform? Are we enabling or are we disabling? That is the question. Hope you found it useful. Hope you found it interesting. I think we're within the 20 minutes, just about. And so keep those questions coming. We might go to 2 a week. If I get lots and lots more questions, then we will likely go to 2 a week. I've had some questions around S2000M, which are really interesting. So I'm looking at putting in some 2000M stuff. If you want that, or any of the other specifications that are out there, DITA, those kind of things, give me a thumbs up and send me some comments, and we will look at how we can introduce those. If you send me more and we've got plenty of content, then I might go to 2 a week. It's this all stressful enough putting 1 a week out, but yeah, like, share, subscribe. I wanted to get 400 by the end of the year. It looks like we'll smash that. So yeah, keep them coming. Stay safe. Speak to you on the other side.